This podcast is recorded on stolen and unceded Aboriginal land.
We acknowledge the First Nations and elders of this country, and we join their calls for justice.
We're back.
What the fuck? We're back. Do you remember that movie, We're Back, with the dinosaurs?
No.
You're too young. Oh,
Yeah.
so good. It's about these dinosaurs that came back and they're like, we're back, and then they were in a circus, I think.
What are you guys anyway? Dinosaurs, actually.
What? And they said, what the fuck, we're back.
They didn't say what the fuck. We're back. It was just called We're Back. It's a good show. That'd be great. What the fuck? We're fucking dinosaurs and we're back?
So that was just purely something that you came up with, was the idea of saying, what the fuck, we're back.
Yes, I said that, then I transitioned seamlessly into reminiscing about the film We're Back.
And we are.
It's very true. Thank you for, I hope you enjoyed the Will Anderson episode, everyone. Thanks for letting us have a week off. Obviously, we're, again, mourning for the Queen, and it was a really tough week. It was really difficult.
Yeah. So we needed that space, that time.
We needed that space to heal, and now we're back.
I imagine that that's also why Bob Catter was wearing sunnies in the chamber this week to kind of just like, you know, hide his eyes, probably a little bit red still from crying. Did you see this?
I didn't realize he was wearing sunnies.
Well, So I actually haven't seen it. I just saw, I think on the Guardian Live blog, a lot of people are asking about Bob Catter's aviator-style sunglasses. And that apparently, he just like came and was just like sitting in the Senate. Not the Senate.
Lower house.
In the lower house. Yeah, just with these big sunnies on. And just side note, I'll explain why that might be soon. But then when I tried to find photos of that from this week and I searched Twitter, and like over the years, like many, many years, it's like a recurrent thing is like Bob Catter wearing aviator sunglasses or just like sunglasses in Parliament and just like in inappropriate situations. And there's this wild photo of him. I don't know how, but it's Pauline Hanson and a press pack reflected in his sunnies. And she looks like she has that real like distorted look, like a fisheye lens kind of like looking up at his sunglasses. It's bizarre. Anyway, but why was he wearing sunnies in the chamber? The conclusion they then came to next on the Guardian Live blog, which I don't follow, to be clear, because I do not have time for that, but I was looking at it for some specific reason, I swear. And they said, what's behind Bob Catter's shades in Parliament? Wait, the sunglasses may be part of a Bob Catter bit. I've just seen this statement from his office. I'll read you this statement that he posted on Facebook. Again, another thing the Catters do, they post their media statements on Facebook in full, no context. Love that.
But just also that we've got politicians doing bits now. Like just...
Oh, yeah.
I know we know that. I know there's all stunts and stuff.
It's the Catters. Like, that's what they do. That's kind of all they do, really.
Love it.
Kennedy MP Bob Catter has come out as Robin Hood for everyday hardworking Australians. But hang on, I thought he came out as Robbie Hood. If that's meant to be the bit, is he comes out as Robbie Hood because that's his nickname, Robbie. His name's Bob Catter, Robbie. Confusingly, his younger son, also a politician.
Yes.
Actual name called Robbie. Anyway.
Yeah.
I think he came out as Robbie Hood. He came out as Robbie Hood for everyday hardworking Australians against the tax cuts.
Oh, my God. Yes, Comrade Catter, yes.
Right? This is where, like, the agrarian socialist Catter vibe comes in. And you're like, they're so homophobic. Why? He goes, it can't be fathomed how Parliament can give $245 billion in tax cuts for the highest income earners while North Queenslanders are struggling to make ends meet and put food on the table. Like, okay, Max speech. Dressed in metaphorical Lincoln green, Bob will wield a sword through the proposed tax cuts for the rich and give to the poor, joining the crossbench in seeking to repeal the tax cuts bill. Polar opposites on most things, Mr. Catter agreed with Greens leader Adam Bandt that the tax cuts for the wealthy were unfair to everyday Australians.
Correct. So is the green thing also like a nod to the Greens? Like I agree with the Greens?
No. He's wearing Lincoln green, which is what Robin Hood wore.
Okay.
There's a meme on this Facebook. It's got like the meme font, the impact font up the top. That's how I know it's a meme. It says Catter, Robin Hood. They're going with Robin. Why did they not say Robbie Hood? I'm so confused. Anyway, Robin Hood for everyday Australians. It's Bob Catter with his akubra. It's like that weird, it's like his head photoshopped onto a picture of Robin Hood with a bow and arrow, which, it does get confusing when he's then wielding a metaphorical sword through the tax cuts.
Yeah, no, he really should be shooting an arrow into its heart. It's
like
fine.
it.
I'll take it. And these comments are interesting. Obviously, Cat are fans.
Yeah, did you?
know.
I saw I was reading the comments too. Which one are you looking at?
Well, but like some people going, "Fuck yeah." Someone saying "King of the North."
Yeah.
Other people saying, "Oh, Michael Lynch says, but Robin Hood was a thief. Are you a thief, Bob?"
Yeah.
Oh God.
This one, great work yet again, Bob. We need to keep breaking down this stupidity and open the eyes of our media-soaked society to see what is actually going on every day. So true, Ron Donges. You know what Ron Donges' profile pic is?
What?
It's a car.
Talk about the Greens, that bunch of idiots.
So the Greens have this image, being the most moral party, cuddly. In fact, it's secretive and it has plenty of its own scandals and feuds.
Frankly, I've always found the Greens to be a real serious danger to Australia.
Serious danger to Australia.
Classic. Well, Bob Catter, welcome to The Resistance, and welcome to you, dear listener. This is Serious Danger, a podcast about Greens politics in Australia, not an official Greens Party podcast. I'm Tom Ballard. That is Emerald Moon. This show is made possible with the help of the Green Institute. And thanks for joining us. This week we're talking about the legalising it, baby.
Let's get high. I've never done weed, as you can probably tell.
No. I know you're straight edge, but it'd be so interesting to see.
Yeah, I don't know. It'd probably
really
just be really annoying.
We'll also be getting to the messy personal dramas surrounding Green senators. All the goss and spilling the tea.
Yeah, I know Tom describing messy personal, describing racism motions as messy personal dramas. So cancel him straight away.
Yeah, I might get cancelled chat on this. We'll find out. Thank you to the patrons who have joined the show. You can go to patreon.com/seriousdangerau for as little as $3 a month. Help pay the Griff's wage. And, did I say it's produced by Michael Griffin? I should have said that.
I don't know, but it is.
It is. Thank you to Eleanor, Sean, Annika, Mitch, Liam, Damien. That's Damien Payne from my local branch. Hello, beautiful Damien. Christopher, The Noetic, Craig, Natalia, Zachariah, Sean, Ryan, McNeely Smith, Monica Lindau, DJ Robodebt. There you go. A previous guest on a Patreon episode.
So he gets
Rob
to hear
Lichter.
himself. That's the
It's
only
just
reason.
great. Yeah, I assume
we
that's
wouldn't
the
let
only
him.
reason. Michael John Reed, Sean Malcolm, and Grant, thank you so much. We really appreciate your support.
Did you not notice that there's 3 Seans in there?
That's a shitload of Seans.
Like, we're becoming a podcast exclusively for Seans. I don't know. Seans, we love you. We welcome you.
Quick shout out to our Tassie comrades and friends who are fighting the revolution by voting in local council elections. This is from patron Damien Irving. Sent us a message. Hi, Emerald, Tom, and Mike. The local government elections in Tasmania are fast approaching. People vote via the post over the period the 3rd to the 25th of October. If you're looking for content for your shout-outs, everybody vote for the Greens. There are 24 candidates running across 15 councils. There are 29 local councils in Tasmania. I think I've heard of this. There's shitloads of local
heaps.
councils.
It's a small place.
For a very small place. We've got 8 councils elected across the state at the 2018 election. We're pretty confident of doing better than that. They're door knocking, they're phone banking, they're doing all the good stuff. We'll put some links in the show notes. But yes, if you see that little thing in your mail, don't ignore it. Please vote for the Greens. That'd be fantastic. And if you want to help out with the campaigns, local council elections are very boring, but also very important because you can actually do a lot of good stuff.
I don't know. We should have a conversation at someday about council communists or radical local government potential for radical action at a local government level. I mean, Jonathan Sri Ranganathan, let's go.
Absolutely. I mean, the Brisbane Council is a special case, I would argue, but yes, it's certainly very true.
It is special, most beautiful city in the world, but that's beside the point, Tom.
The Hobart City Council is extremely progressive. I believe there's a couple of Greens on there on that council, but they're doing some very cool shit. So thank you, Damien, who is the state convener of Tasmanian Greens. Thank you for being a patron, and good luck out there. Good luck out there? God, I've had a week off.
Tom?
Good luck out there. Let's do the show.
I got love for a girl named Mary Jane. What y'all know about Mary Jane? How y'all feel about Mary Jane?
Insert bong ripping sound, Mike. Ooh, Tom, that was a good hit.
Fuck, you're such a narc.
Wouldn't it be good if it were legal?
Yeah, just legalize it, bro.
Wait, no, my bit is actually that the reason I've never smoked weed is because it's illegal.
Oh,
so
yes, of course. Okay, that's
the good thing about if we were legal, then I'll be able to use it because
well, that's everybody's position. Everybody's just gagging to do some cannabis, and they just can't. There's no way to find it. We don't know where it is. But it's just this law. As soon as that law gets passed, they just straight on the wacky tobacco and immediately getting schizophrenia and destroying their lives.
Exactly. And that's exactly what the Greens are pushing for. So this week, Green Senator David Shoebridge, New South Wales Senator, gave notice of his intention to move a bill to legalise cannabis federally.
Yay.
So they haven't yet, how it works in federal parliament, they have to say they're going to do it and then they do it at some point. I don't know. But what I think is interesting, or actually not interesting, and we'll get into this, is that they led with this angle around like the legal advice that they received about being able to legalise cannabis federally. So this is from David Shoebridge's Facebook post that was kind of when the story first broke. He says, legal advice obtained by my office shows that the Greens can pass a bill to legalise cannabis nationally. Yay. All state legislation criminalising its legal use, possession and sale can be overridden. We could legalise cannabis across the country this year. Talks about the fact that 40% of Australians have used cannabis. It drags vulnerable people through the criminal justice system. 60% of Sydney-siders in the National Drug Strategy Household Survey want it legalised. And then, look, you say that I am a fucking dog talking about cannabis. What do you think about this line? If you are an adult and want to chill out with cannabis, you should be able to without the threat of police violence or imprisonment, without worrying whether you can be sent to prison for smoking a joint with friends. Chill out with cannabis?
No, that is very square, bro. That's not great. I did Question Everything this week and they covered the story. And yeah, there was a Channel 10 headline that was like they used the expression taking cannabis as well.
Taking cannabis?
No one can just talk, just smoking weed. Just say that, that's you weirdos.
Very funny. Yeah. Why do you think it's smart, don't you, that they led with this legal advice angle? Don't you think it's boring?
Well, look, it's all boring. Anything to do with the Constitution or federal
Legalising
legislation.
Cannabis is not boring, though. That's of all things.
Right, okay. To me, this is a strategy to blunt the argument that federal politicians, particularly the Labor government, would like to use, which is, hey, none of our business, not for us. That should be left to the state. That's outside our jurisdiction. This happens all the time. It's a rebuff to these kind of policy proposals, right? It was a sticking point when Max proposed the rent freeze. You know, cue everybody saying that's not a federal responsibility. We can't do it. It's outside of our power. If you're proposing those kind of legislative moves, you need to have an answer for that, I think. And the answer being that this is totally possible. We've got a constitutional lawyer guy who, you know, seemed quite cool actually on the news talking about looking into it and sort of saying that at any point the federal government could do this. They could have overwritten ACT laws, which decriminalises personal use and stuff, but they're not. Just reducing it to a political choice and zeroing in on the fact that the federal Labor government does not want to decriminalise or legalise marijuana, not because they can't, but because they won't, and to make them justify that position. I think that's fine.
But that's what I think it doesn't do. Like, I think strategically, and I think I've said this before about other things, I don't think that you should lead something with your opponent's frame. Like, I reckon going into it in the frame of, the obstacle to doing this was this like constitutional issue around licensing for a legal framework for the sale of cannabis. So that's the issue that we need to address, rather than going into it as this is an issue of political will. To me, yeah, you set it up for the debate then to be around the legalities. And like legal advice is just legal advice. Like, you know, the government could say they have opposing advice, like they have advice that says something different. But yeah, to me, it means they can then it also makes it sound as though, there was some technical reason that we haven't legalized cannabis. It's not because the major parties are fucking loser scaredy cats. And don't you think that's a more useful frame?
No, I think it's about shaping the debate. Again, I didn't know this information beforehand. Okay, like sincerely,
Do you actually understand what the legal advice is about?
Well, the criminal matters are overwhelmingly at the state level, right? Like different states have different laws and deal with crime legislation. Mm-hmm. So I would have thought, and this is why I was hoping that the Victorian Greens campaign leading to the state election would prioritise and front and zero in on our policy to legalise weed. I think that would be a really great vote winner, would be a clear differentiation between us and Labor, and is a very good thing to do that would make this state better. It would make a lot of people's lives better. So I always thought that this kind of battle would play out at the state and territory level primarily, as it has in the United States, for example. I just thought that was the battleground in which this sort of issue would be fought.
I don't even think that that's what this advice is about. Like, I've worked on this and I'm still confused. And I think that it's not clear what we're even talking about here, because isn't the issue in terms of legal, like criminal sanctions around cannabis, is the fact that it's listed, it's a Schedule 9 drug in the poison standard, which is the TGA, the Therapeutic Goods Administration, and like a federal body regulates that. So if they rescheduled it, like even if the states had moved to legalise or decriminalise cannabis, particularly to decriminalise, they would be hampered by that scheduling, which is a federal thing.
Well, again, in the US, you've had these kind of bizarre situations where certain states have legalised it and set up a legal marijuana industry, but then any money they use, like there are federal laws affecting where you can put the money for that stuff.
More the issue.
So that's all fucking
It's actually
crazy.
as I understand it, this legal advice is more about how do we set up a national commercial, a national system for the sale and taxing of cannabis rather than the element around criminal, like whether it's criminalized or not. But again, it's just the fact that I'm like bored and confused. I just think that ultimately it's one of those things that it's like, there's a way, like where there's a will, there's a way. And I just don't think getting into the intricacies of how it fucking works in the Constitution and the legislation is what we really need to sell to people. And you would have seen, what message, I think we would have got the message that this is around, the new piece of information is this legal advice. But a lot of the media didn't necessarily lead with that because they're like, the Greens are going to legalise cannabis. That's the lead.
Yep.
So why not just do that?
Well, I think the ultimate effect, for people who are paying attention, is that, yes, the Greens are for the legalisation of marijuana. They're doing something about that at the federal level. Now, I don't know what happened. What happened with the bill that was introduced and ignored?
This bill?
Yes.
No, so this is one. Yeah, so they've only given notice of an intention to move the bill and not actually been moved yet. I don't know if it's useful, but they're basically saying that they would use Section 51 of the Constitution around copyrights, patents, and inventions and designs to enable the Commonwealth to regulate plant variety rights, and the Commonwealth could regulate them and cause them to be listed in a schedule in respect of which the Commonwealth has exclusive regulatory control. Now, I'm curious as to whether that means only like a national body is the retailer of cannabis, or whether they're saying just that the federal government would regulate potentially commercial enterprises like corporations selling cannabis, because that's a whole other question around the corporatization of a cannabis industry and like a profit motive, and just allowing these like massive pharmaceutical companies and like evil, corporations to benefit from an industry which, previously has been a source of income for poor people and marginalized people. That's a thing.
So we need small cannabis businesses, or we can't.
Or like
we can't
cannabis
secede
co-ops
to big
and
cannabis.
like there's
Publicly
when I
owned
looked into
cannabis stores.
Well, yes, that's not, you laugh, but that's what I mean. Like genuinely, I wonder, because this is a question that I've looked into a lot before. If we're starting from scratch with an industry theoretically, but I guess we're not, because there is an existing cannabis industry. It's just on the black market. But wouldn't you try to set it up as something that is like wholly publicly owned, or only co-ops or non-profits can do this? And surely they would be able to undercut black market dealers anyway, because they'd be able to sell it for less money. I think this is something that needs to be discussed. But at the same time, I'm the one arguing, like, keep it simple, just talk about legalise it or don't legalise it. So I don't know, maybe I'm a hypocrite.
I tell you, again, another good thing about this story that I saw was, people telling the person, I will say that, we don't need necessarily lawyers with investment properties saying chill out with cannabis and politicians. We need real ordinary people talking in the media about their experience of this in a very relatable way. I saw a guy who said that he smoked some weed and then was driving, got pulled over. He was smoking weed recreationally, got pulled over and, got fucked up with his, was charged and stuff. And just, I guess, ordinary people saying, look, I smoke weed. Lots of people, smoke weed.
Yeah.
Some people do it a lot. Some people do it just sometimes. It's a common part of life. Everybody knows this. And the idea that you should be prosecuted for that for the personal use of cannabis is ridiculous. I think that's how you're going to win. And I would like to see the Greens, I'm sure they do a lot of this that I'm just not across, but, allying themselves with drug decriminalisation organisations and, that campaign really needs to have like a really broad social weight. And first and foremost should be people. People have been to prison because of stupid cannabis charges and that kind of thing. That's how I think you're going to cut through.
But there would be people who would argue that it's better for someone like David Shoebridge, a lawyer in a suit, to stand up and talk about legalizing cannabis than it is for an ordinary cannabis user to talk about it, because it's kind of breaking out of the mold of or the idea of who uses cannabis and at what level is it acceptable to talk about legalizing cannabis. And that's the other important thing that, because we are talking about legalizing and not just decriminalizing. Again, this is another one where I question whether I am in a bubble because to me, I just think legalizing cannabis is so broadly accepted. I mean, I know that it's only, this surveys consistently kind of show over 50% support, which is good and significant in that neither major party then is moving on it. But at the same time, that's not that's not huge. No. It's less than I would kind of expect. Yeah.
Yeah, look, it's still, I mean, look at the way it's treated immediately in the media. Again, on Question Everything, we played a clip of Carl Stefanovic talking to Jim Chalmers about it, and they were playing Bob Marley underneath it, okay?
Yeah,
every go-to dismissal of the Greens is, what have the Greens been smoking? Oh, the Greens are all hippies, chilfers. So it's just fucking pathetic. So, of course, that's hard to kick through. Look at the way medical cannabis has changed. Didn't Tony Abbott support medical cannabis or something?
Well, lots of people support medical cannabis.
Yeah.
That's the thing. But it's there. You actually put this link in. James McPherson on Sky News has done this piece about this proposal. But I think there's so many interesting things here in this response. So the headline, and this is more than your average 6-word headline, classic for these websites. The headline is, trust the Greens to make legalizing marijuana a core policy platform as the rest of the world battles the cost of living crisis and the spectre of war in the Pacific.
Well, maybe if we smoked more weed, there wouldn't be so much war. Hello?
So true.
Hey, Vlad, smoke a bit of this, bro, and then you won't get into Ukraine?
Yeah.
Come on, baby.
Yeah. You may be poor. You may not be able to fucking pay the rent, but just chill out with cannabis. Chill out with cannabis as an adult. But it's a good – I was like, honestly, that's the angle that you would go with if you were going to attack this is why the fuck is this what the Greens are focusing on when people are struggling to just get by in life? And that's kind of a good attack on the Greens, who are traditionally seen as focusing on just these kind of fun or social or airy-fairy reforms and not addressing materialist issues, not addressing hip pocket issues, doing nothing for the economy or cost of living. That is a good attack. But then the article itself doesn't really do that. That's just the headline. I was like, oh, scary article. And then the article is just this stupid, cherry-picked evidence, mostly baseless article about the dangers or the risks of cannabis. And that's where I just don't think that the vast majority of people these days believe that cannabis is a dangerous drug for your health, right?
No, people definitely don't think that. And to the extent at which it is a danger for some people, a very small number of users who use it a lot, who should be treated as a health issue.
Particularly if you use it younger.
Sure, look, people will accept that there are risks and factors and considerations, health implications of smoking weed. I think any reasonable person would say that. I think the crux of it all is legalizing it will not mean that everybody starts smoking weed. Everyone who wants to smoke weed pretty much now is smoking weed, okay? Like, it's very easy to access. Lots of people are doing it. And through the same way we treat alcohol, regulation, education, treating as health, any kind of addiction or health implications as a health problem, that's the way to go. At the moment, all that money in business is in the hands of, yes, a whole bunch of ordinary poor people who are doing it to make ends meet, but also, let's be real, some massive criminal organizations that makes up this huge black market that helps out criminals. I mean, I don't want to be a tough on crime kind of guy, but seriously, if you wanted to make that stronger argument, that the idea that the drug law just does not work. It does not work. It is not stopping the business.
Yeah, that's an interesting thing that you've raised, actually. What do you think about sometimes that the angle that's taken or the messaging around drug decriminalization, legalization, particularly with cannabis, it's like taking it out of the hands of dangerous criminals and gangs and like stopping this contact with the underworld and the black market. And I'm like, do we really want to use that language of fear? And it is kind of, it's tough on crime language to push our point here. And I also think my concern with that is that it pushes us towards a model of decriminalization rather than legalization, a model where, like we've got in the ACT, where theoretically you can use cannabis, you can have small amounts of cannabis on your person, you can grow it, but you can't buy it. No one can sell it. And so it doesn't address that supply side. Like, it still continues to criminalize dealers. I don't know.
I think the legalizing model totally counters the supply issue. The idea is that, if you legalize it, if you have cannabis stores, people will go and buy their cannabis from there rather than talk to buy it off street dealers. And I appreciate the angle there. There is a the drug crime syndicates are in the black market of buying and selling all kinds of drugs. You get this extra level of sort of horror and fucked upness, right? Where all the violence and like if you have a problem with a drug interaction or a drug deal, okay, something goes particularly bad or there's violence payback, you don't go to the police for help or you don't go to any authorities. You're just completely on your own. And that's actually why often all this stuff is so fucked up and violent and bad, is that obviously people aren't saying, this person violently bashed me because they wanted to steal all my drugs or whatever, because then obviously you're up for prosecution as well. So
I don't know. Like, am I doing hashtag not all drug dealers? I guess I just
you mentioned this before, and it's completely the punishment and the prosecution and the demonization of ordinary people who are at the very end, the customer facing end of the drug deal. Are overly punished and they're often very precarious situations, and you understand why they get involved in drug dealing, that's for sure. But there are big kingpins that are fucking cunts and evil who will fuck over ordinary working people through the course of the drug trade that are bad. And I do think that taking their business off them is a good thing.
Yeah. Another reason that I know that this James McPherson article in Sky News is very much out of line with, I would say, the vast majority of people in Australia. One of the lines that he has in there, this is my favorite, they call it dope for a reason. But he doesn't mean it's dope. He means like you're a dope, like you're dopey, because it's the fucking 1950s and that's how we use that word. It's really good.
What a real screwball.
Oh. Yeah. It's funny, just returning to that thing about the discourse of health and cannabis. I know that there's discussion around how we talk about drugs, and particularly how we talk about cannabis, and kind of a conscious effort to move beyond the health discourse, even though we have our drugs platform that's like treating drugs as a health issue rather than a criminal one. And that is an argument that, we legalise cannabis so that we can enable people to get help if they need it, so that we can regulate the supply of it more effectively and kind of the quality of cannabis and that sort of thing. But at the same time, there are some people who are like, we don't want to overly, act as though it's a health concern. But then in that Vox, there are these Vox pops that SBS did, just a bunch of people in the street saying, would you smoke cannabis or would you use cannabis if it were legal?
Hell yeah, bro. It does no harm. It spreads love. Yeah, and I really, really love it. Yeah.
Never use it. Never will.
Oh, God, no. At my age, I'm 84, darling. I don't think I need anything like that.
Yeah, sometime. Of course, sometime for sure.
No. I'm very anti-drugs.
Personally, no. But I have friends who would, and, I think each their own choice.
I'm not allowed to by my parents. A bit strict.
Probably.
Definitely not for me.
I can see what damage it can do, but then I can also see what benefit it can do as well. So.
I haven't considered it, to be honest. I haven't really given it a thought.
If it is a medical medicine, it's okay.
I mean, if I was in pain or in a situation where I needed it, not in a normal situation, I might consider it.
I might for sleep.
And I think from their responses that most of them who say they would or would consider it are thinking of it as like a medicine. They're not thinking of it as they're answering as though you're asking about medicinal cannabis.
Yeah.
Don't you think that's interesting?
Sure, because that's people who don't use marijuana thinking about what context in which I would use marijuana.
They would use it, right.
Legalise it. And there are some of the people at that Vox Pop who are like, yeah, sure, I smoke weed every now and again. Yeah, of course. It's just like it's there. It is once again, the drug war is a classic example of how the left, that are constantly regarded as out of touch of reality, utopian thinkers, we don't know how the real world works. Okay, but when it comes to the drug debate, in which we acknowledge the clear reality that people use drugs and they have access to drugs. There is a drug trade in our society. People are doing it all the time, for fuck's sake. Okay, just acknowledging that fact and thinking about a different approach as to how it works in society. No, then we're crazy. We must be high ourselves. What are we smoking, for God's sakes? Yeah, and look, and it is, to me, this is fucking same-sex marriage. This is homosexuality decriminalization. It is people on the left who are way ahead of the curve. We know this thing's going to happen eventually. Of course, no one will give us credit until it actually does happen, or even when it does happen, of course. But it is just clearly a direction in which the society is going. It's just taking so fucking long, like everything else in this country.
Well, yeah, but I would argue that maybe I'm being overly optimistic. I think we're not that far off legalizing, or at least decriminalizing cannabis broadly across the country. And in fact, I mean, I think we've mentioned this on the show before, but the fact that the Queensland Productivity Commission in 2020 recommended legalizing cannabis and MDMA just tells me that this is not necessarily such a radical idea anymore. And it's an interesting strategic question that I often ask about myself, about whether we are better off pressing on these things where we know that we may get a win soon, or we focus on stuff that no one is talking about, where we really need to shift the open window. I'm so sorry to use the term open window on my fucking podcast.
Someone did a politics course.
But it's true. Shifting the scope of things that we talk about and consider. And from two angles, I mean that. One, Overton window, as in what our society sees as reasonable scope of conversation, shifting, that frame, but also shifting the frame of how people in Australia, voters in Australia, see the Greens. And so should we be focusing on pushing that beyond what we're known for, or, this core stuff that we might be able to win and then be like, yep, the Greens have been fighting this for this fucking decades. We get stuff done. You should vote for us because we're clearly on the right side of history and we can make things happen. I don't know. Everyone already, do you think everyone knows that the Greens want to legalise cannabis, right? Do they?
Yeah, but that's still a dividing line between us and Labor. Federal Labor shut it down. Victorian state Labor shut it down. The only place where it's happened, ACT, hey, what do you know? We're in coalition.
But will people change their vote on it?
Yeah, that's a good point. whether it is a vote decider or not. I just think if you're a young person in this country and you see a major political party, you know, consistently advocating for this and taking a reasonable, like obvious approach to this issue that will touch your life in some way. You will either know people who smoke weed or you smoke weed yourself. Or even if you have nothing to do with it at all, you kind of go, you know, I know that people smoke weed. I know it's nowhere near this horrible thing that I'm constantly told it is by the bullshit conservative media and political classes. I think there's an attraction to that. I think that means that's a party that does things a little bit differently. And is speaking some truth. So I think it's a good thing. And I still think we have a very long way to go, really.
Yeah.
At this stage.
Yeah. I think, and to be honest, I'm not sure that my view on this is entirely settled and I'm still working it out. I've been having lots of good conversations with people about this balance recently, but I think that there's a place for kind of two broad categories of work that the Greens do. And one is really trying to shift how we're seen in the work that we can do so that we really are a force for broad-scale economic transformation, for redistribution, that we're talking about cost of living and, you know, taxing the rich to pay for things that improve people's everyday lives, that kind of big picture socialist policy. And then there is also, though, I think we can bring people in by representing them in a way and by catching their attention. And a lot of the time that's not, I think that can be done with things that aren't just those big ticket economic items. And sometimes it's just the way that our MPs act. Sometimes it's on social issues like legalizing cannabis. And it's true that you may pull in a different kind of people and people on a broader scale to just consider the Greens for the first time by talking about things that'll impact their hip pocket. But it's also true, particularly for young people, when you door knock them and you say legalizing cannabis, they kind of just, it gets them thinking about the Greens and it makes them think, oh yeah, that's the party that represents me. Yeah. And so they may be more. Yeah, I think that there's a place for both. But we can't, I don't think that we should let these kind of things that are just our bread and butter subsume the harder work to break into, which is around those economic transformative policies.
Yeah.
Smoke weed every day.
Get Snoop Dogg involved. He'll do an ad for fucking anything, it seems. Get him out. It's the motherfucking Eagle Double G. Snoop Dogg. Speaking of the way our MPs act and what people think of the party and such, bit of messy drama this week in Parliament involving a few senators.
Senators
Pauline Hanson has declared
some drama around some senators.
I just want to sex it up a bit, you know. Hot goss. Pauline Hanson has declared she's not racist while doubling down on her comments telling Green Senator Mehreen Faruqi to piss off back to Pakistan. Incredible sentence there.
I regularly have to declare myself not a racist, and that's how I know I'm not a racist.
On the 9th of September, the One Nation senator used expletives on Twitter in reply to Senator Faruqi's recent criticism of the British monarchy. We mentioned this on the show a couple of weeks ago. Mehreen expressed condolences to those who knew the Queen, but said she couldn't mourn the leader of a racist empire built on stolen lives, land, and the wealth of colonised peoples. Totally fair enough. Hanson told the Pakistan-born Australian to go back to her country of birth. On Tuesday, the Greens sought to censure Senator Hanson over her divisive, anti-migrant and racist statement in the Senate. So, yes, Parliament's back, obviously. A whole bunch of condolences motions going towards the Queen. Adam used it as a chance to say, hey, we didn't choose King Charles. Let's have a republic, please. Mm-hmm. But then also this was playing out. What is a censure motion? Should we let people know that, Emerald? What's the deal with these things?
Isn't it just like most motions where you say the House agrees that XXX?
Yeah.
But it's specifically about saying someone is bad. Someone in here did a bad thing. We don't like them. We think it's naughty and bad that they did it.
They're bad. Now, probably the most famous one in recent memory is the House censuring Fraser Anning for his horrific white supremacist response to the Christchurch massacre and that horrific speech he gave, in which we need a final solution, and just fucking awful. And everyone got to stand up and say how fucked a racist he was, except for Pauline Hanson, of course, who did not get involved in that particular censure motion.
Funny.
I mean, it was interesting. I was looking through a little bit of the history. Richard Colbeck got censured for his management of the aged care sector during the pandemic. There's a few others. John Howard, apparently, courtesy of Bob Brown moving it back in 2003, was eventually censured by the Senate over the war in Iraq.
Wow.
But, I mean, if you go through the history, you just kind of go, oh, none of this matters. It doesn't really do anything.
Yeah. Wait, that motion didn't stop the Iraq war?
It hasn't even tarnished his reputation or anything. It's not like an impeachment, even those are often effective too. But it's just sort of this. It does seem a little bit grandstandy, but that's just my vibe. But I also don't know whether you can only do it to stuff that happens in the parliament. Like, certainly that seemed to be the argument that some people were running here that Pauline Hanson's comments happened outside the parliament. Therefore, it's not
right.
The Senate's
I don't
place,
know. I don't know what the rules are.
Here was the motion that the Greens were proposing. They wanted the Senate to propose that the Senate condemns all racism and discrimination against migrants and people of colour, assures all migrants to Australia that they are valued, welcome members of our society, affirms that if the Parliament is to be a safe place for all who work and visit here, there can be no tolerance for racism or discrimination in the course of parliamentarians' public debate, and D, censures Senator Hanson for her divisive, anti-migrant and racist statement telling Senator Faruqi to piss off back to Pakistan, which does not reflect the opinions of the Australian Senate or the Australian people.
Mm-hmm.
So that was the motion that was proposed. Mehreen Faruqi got up, spoke, I thought, quite powerfully, particularly about Hanson's full record, just list a bunch of her racist shit over the years and pointing out the fact that she has never been held to account for that, of course, and that's why it's important from her point of view that something is done when she does this kind of stuff.
Like many migrants and people of colour in this country, I've been told to go back to where I come from hundreds of times. Senator Pauline Hanson did it a few days ago, telling me in a tweet to piss off back to Pakistan. Senator Hanson's catalogue of racist filth over the past decades is widely known and truly despicable. And yet, she has rarely been held to account, if at all. She faced no real consequences in 1996 when she said this country was in danger of being swamped by Asians. And then again in 2016 when she claimed that we were now in danger of being swamped by Muslims. She faced no real accountability in 2006 when she claimed Africans coming to Australia had AIDS and were of no benefit to this country. She faced no real sanction in 2017 when she called Islam a disease against which we need to vaccinate ourselves. She faced no real sanction in 2017 when she mockingly wore a burqa into this chamber. Racism must be identified and called out every single time, and people who spew such hate must face serious consequences. Let me say this loudly and clearly to Senator Hanson. Us, black and brown people, have every right to participate in public debate, just like white people.
Senator Penny Wong agreed with the general sentiments of the motion. She said, oh, yes, the comments were appalling. The racist attacks were an attack on democracy because fundamentally what it's saying is that you're not equal. She reflected on her own experience as a Malaysian-born Australian citizen and, how many times you're told that you're not really Australian. And, that was quite moving and, that was fair enough. But in the end, Labor and Liberals didn't actually support the censuring of Hanson specifically, and the whole thing was kind of watered down. So the motion was changed to condemn racism and discrimination in all its forms. So not just against migrants and people of colour, I guess, but for all its forms.
Can I pause on that quickly? Because all of the discourse that I saw, including from the Greens after Labor amended it, was about the fact that it didn't censure Pauline Hanson specifically, and maybe this is kind of what we're talking about. But I'm like, to me, that's far less egregious than specifically going out of your way to remove the words against migrants and people of colour and being like, take them out and just say everyone. We want to remove migrants and people of colour from this.
Yeah, the only possibility that opens up to me is racism against white people or reverse racism.
That's literally, that's what I mean. I'm like, okay, see, to me, I'm much more concerned about the fact that they just denied the actual structure, the way that racism works as a fucking concept and racial fucking hierarchies and white supremacy, which is what this is meant to be about. But the problem is that it wasn't censuring Hanson. Okay.
Don't discriminate against migrants, people of colour, against Pauline Hanson, all the victims of racism. We stand in solidarity with you.
Yeah.
So change that, and then also change the specific censuring of Pauline Hanson and broaden it to a call on all senators to engage in debates and commentary respectfully and to refrain from inflammatory and divisive comments both inside and outside the chamber at all times.
Also, to take a motion against racism and turn it into a fucking, like, civility in the chamber motion,
Right. Yes.
that makes me sick. No inflammatory or divisive comments.
Yes.
It's fucking parliament. It's
I know.
politics. You're meant to defy. Like, it should be inflammatory. You're talking about people's lives. You're talking about things that you fundamentally disagree on. And if you're not, why the fuck are you in there?
No, when we're passing legislation to lock up refugees indefinitely, we should do it in a civil
Don't
way.
want it to be inflammatory.
No.
Our words about that shouldn't be inflammatory.
Mehreen Faruqi was disappointed that the actual specific censure didn't go through, and she's since lodged a complaint with the Human Rights Commission over the tweet, saying that racism must be held to account. So, look, yes, should we care about this, Emerald? And is this a loss for anti-racism? Does this matter? You know, again, those frustrations of changing the motion. If you're going to vote for the motion, then I guess you think you're saying the motion matters and therefore the changing the language does matter. But more broadly, to me, this seems like they're motherhood statements. It doesn't really mean much. It seems a little grandstandy. Now, with a full caveat that I'm a white dude and I think Mehreen Faruqi is fucking cool. We're both white people. We have no idea what it's like to be a migrant in this country and to live through that. It's fucking awful and disgusting and racist, and I can't imagine the kind of shit that all people of colour in the public eye cop on a very regular basis, and it's disgusting and bad. I just don't know about this strategy. What do you think?
Yeah, I mean, you know, I think it's similar actually to what we're talking about legalising cannabis, that this is very classic Greens work. I think it's what people expect of the Greens, and I don't necessarily think that it helps us break out of the mold like we're trying to do. And my issue with it as well is, yes, it places a lot of emphasis on and almost trust in the institution of and the mechanisms available to us via Parliament to make as though that means anything. And I've said before, I think that the Australian Greens tend to fall into thinking that Parliament matters when they shouldn't. And I think that's an absolute trap and it's a waste of time. But at the same time, I know that for people of colour and migrants, probably like there would be people watching that and it would mean something to them. And when they see a public debate about their right to fucking exist or, you know, live in their country without hatred or violence, and there's no counterpoint to that, no voice is for them in that debate, that has real world impacts that can, you know, this shit leads to real and sometimes physical harm to people. So there is that angle that it kind of has to be done because it's right. But yeah, how much time do we spend on it? How do we make sure that then the Greens aren't just the party of like holding the government to account in Parliament? We're just the Democrats and we trust Parliament and we're going to, you know, have a go at them for being mean when they're mean and bad, rather than a party that is going to fundamentally transform our society and economically and make your life, everyone's life, better with a real kind of materialist and class-based politics. That was a long answer.
No, it's fair enough. It's complicated because Pauline Hanson is a racist piece of shit. And she demonstrated that.
Correct.
It is correct. No argument from our point of view. Immediately afterwards, in her own speech on the motion, Hanson angrily refused to retract her earlier statements and doubled down by saying,
I make the offer also to take her to the airport.
Senator Birmingham.
Take Faruqi to the airport herself. So just standing by her statements. The fiery debate was paused several times as the Senate President Sue Lyons demanded senators not interrupt one another. Hanson's comments saw Green Senator Jordan Steele-John angrily call her an absolute scumbag.
Senator Birmingham. Go off, Jordan.
I'm sorry. I like that. Like that's that to me is that's Parliament. That's fine. And I actually think all the bullshit, the pageantry around political debate, and you can't insult people, and the unparliamentary language and all that stuff. And we've talked about it before, how insulated they are from any actual sort of like criticism, or the moment you actually say anything like specific and passionate about certain people, then the speaker will probably say, "Come on now, settle down," and all that kind of shit. And I just think, fuck that. Just say what you think. Call each other scumbags. Yes. I don't mind.
But at the same time, two things. First of all, it's press gallery politics. Like, it is this kind of politics that fawns over what happens in Parliament and the debate on the floor. It's Paul Keating style zingers while he's, privatising the shit out of everything and making things worse for millions of working Australians for decades to come. But people saying, "Oh, but he said I'm going to do you slowly," and that's what we love. That worries me. I don't think that's the arena that we really want to focus on. And the other thing is, there's this argument that we have given Hanson a platform to just be even more fucked up and racist, and that then people have to watch this fucking heinous debate in the chamber where, even worse shit is said, and you're forced to think, oh, is this what people think about me or, my loved ones? I'm not usually one to argue that, we shouldn't blame the person who is pushing for the good thing for then prompting the bad person for being shit. It's the racist's problem that they're racist and they're being racist. No one forced Pauline Hanson to be a racist piece of shit. But you kind of knew that that's possible, that's what she would do, because that's what she does.
What do you think of this? This is Pauline Hanson's statement to The Guardian about the story. Mehreen Faruqi showed extremely poor judgment with her insensitive and highly offensive statement about the Queen, and as is so typical of pants-wetting Greens, now that she's been called out, she's pretending to be a victim. It's classic Karen behaviour, all entitlement and no responsibility.
Karen, Mehreen's such a Karen. I've thought that many times.
So I just love the language of calling out and offensive stuff. So this to me is where the culture war identity politics debate has got, where everyone uses exactly the same language. Everyone is as sensitive a snowflake as everybody else. And it's like, in their war against identity politics, the right have just like swallowed all the same language. And now it's like,
yes, they have.
You triggered me with your comments and I was offended by your comments about the Queen, and I'm calling you out and you've made an unsafe space. It's bizarre where this cultural conversation has got to.
I think it's a very deliberate, I think that her office would have thought they were being very clever in using this language, particularly in a response to a query from The Guardian. Right. I think that's quite deliberate. I mean, but the next paragraph is really interesting.
Mehreen Faruqi is not a victim of anything. Faruqi is just another rich, privileged, out-of-touch greenie, faithfully executing her dear leader's strategy to disrespect and insult the institutions, which have helped make Australia one of the most socially inclusive and diverse nations in the world, including the very institutions which allowed her to come to Australia and make it her home.
And this is where I got to say, that's smart messaging on Hanson's part, because I think there would be people who, first of all, it's smart to frame the Greens as wealthy, privileged, out of touch, and just obsessed with themselves.
Yes.
That they're more concerned with protecting themselves, even though they've got it pretty fucking good while you're struggling. Again, it's, the Greens want to legalise weed because it's fun and they don't actually care, while you haven't got enough shifts this week and you can't afford fucking petrol and you can't afford to pay the rent or the mortgage. That is an effective frame. It's bullshit, obviously.
Yes.
And it's a complete distraction from what this is actually about, which is that Pauline Hanson is racist and is directly targeting a brown woman with her racism. But she's made it not about that.
Yes, and this is my real problem here. Again, Mehreen Faruqi, it's fucking great. Agree with her on a whole bunch of stuff. And again, I cannot speak to her experience, and racism fucking sucks. And that kind of shit from Pauline Hanson, which is
Tom Barlow like, racism's really bad. It's you guys, racism,
I've thought about it.
Knock it off.
I've thought about it a lot. I'm not a fan. But, what is embedded there, obviously in Hanson's statement, is that migrants should shut the fuck up. Migrants cannot criticise anyone who, or, people of a migrant background. Mehreen Faruqi's lived in this country for 30 fucking years, made a wonderful contribution, is a citizen, etc., etc. You can't criticise this country whatsoever. Otherwise, we will tell you to go back to where you came from because they're fucking racist piece of shit. But the problem is, to me, is that Mehreen framed this in terms of safety and the personal effect it had on her. And I just do not believe that Mehreen Faruqi, who's a very intelligent, capable, fierce fighter of a woman, was in any way upset by a tweet that was racist sent to her by Pauline Hanson.
Oh.
We all know that Pauline Hanson is a racist. We all know that, really, do we really think
know.
Mehreen Faruqi's
disagree.
level of self-esteem and her estimation of herself was affected by a horrible racist tweet from Pauline Hanson? Really?
No, I disagree. I think it would have affected her personally. I don't know. Like, I haven't spoken to Mehreen personally, but I think it would have affected her. I think that no matter how big and strong and smart you are or you get, racism, that shit hurts. And particularly in such a public forum, to have someone say that about you, maybe Pauline Hanson's tweet in itself, but the abuse that her and her office would have then had to deal with as a result of that, it would have been overwhelming. It would have just been a flood, a tirade of abuse from people from across the country. And yeah, I don't think it really matters what position you're in. That's just overwhelming. Anyone ganging up on you and attacking you, particularly for something that I imagine is always going to be a deep-seated thing within you, is as a brown person. Yeah, to be told to go back to where you came from, I think it would still hurt.
Well, okay, it might have hurt her on an individual level, but is the response to that the politicization of that interpersonal exchange? And I think that's my issue broadly. So with the individual interpersonal disputes, like we also saw play out with Sarah Hanson-Young's case against David Leinhelm a few years ago. Now, what he said, he sucks. He fucking sucks. He's awful.
Yeah.
And I'm sure from Sarah Hanson-Young's point of view, it was terrible, and women should not have to put up with any kind of misogynist bullshit language in the workplace. I think that's all true. But it's a specific politicization of those individual cases as proxy issues for broader social debates. And like, if I win this, then that's a victory against racism or sexism or what have you. And I do think that can be interpreted or can come across as a constant focusing on literally the individual MPs that were at the center of that. It does create great drama. It is there's always like media bitchy drama story, et cetera, et cetera.
Yeah.
I don't know. I would prefer my MPs to respond to this by saying, fuck these people. This is why they're suck and they're out of touch. This is what we believe in. This is what we fight for. Yes, this is an example of the kind of bullshit that people of colour or women have to put up every single day. This is why we deserve a better society. These are the Greens policies that are going to win that world.
The argument, I would imagine, is, like I said before, that it's not then just about the hurt that it's called Mehreen. It's about the fact that this has created a very public debate, and that thousands of people would have seen a woman, an immigrant woman who, even though she's in this, this position of power, is still subjected to this kind of abuse. And so what that then means about how Australians see immigrants. And so I think people of colour then have to see this debate and go, what does this mean about how people are looking at me when I'm walking around the streets of my town, my community? And so that is the justification for moving this motion that says, actually, no, that's not representative of the Australian people. And we want to condemn that to make it really clear that actually you are valued and, we don't fucking hate you and you're worthwhile. But is a parliament, I don't know if it does that, to be honest. I think that at most these motions and the same with Sarah Hanson-Young's, her thing with David Leinhelm, I think that at most it is for women in politics. I think at most, Mehreen's thing is for people of colour in politics, maybe, where you see someone not allowing that behaviour in your workplace or in that arena. I actually think that if you really, I don't know if it goes beyond that. I don't know if seeing Sarah Hanson-Young stand up to Leinhelm for sexist comments in her workplace made me feel like someone will do that for me in my workplace as a woman. It would require action outside of the arena of Parliament for that to carry outside the arena of Parliament. I think that's it. That it traps this debate in the chamber and in the fucking press gallery and in Australian politics reporting, instead of probably bringing it where it needs to be, which is in the community where people are really getting hurt.
Yeah.
The damage done, primarily with Pauline Hanson's thing, is that it sparks arguments in the comments that are fucking gross and potentially, you know, discussions at dinners and barbecues. And so it's like, that's actually, if we have a movement of people who will be countering that in those spaces, that is the best way to deal with that. And so it comes back to, the best way to tackle this really is not to get in Parliament and move a motion necessarily, but it's to build a movement who are able to completely just squash and overwhelm the right and win.
With Lidia Thorpe, I think we've reached peak Green bullying, abuse and intimidation.
It was complicated a little bit by the other story that was going on in the news this week involving the Greens. Pauline Hanson pointed to this story. Walid Ali asked Mehreen about it when she went on the project to talk about the censure motion and her involvement with trying to get this motion passed and Hanson's tweet. And that is referencing the controversy surrounding Lidia Thorpe. Green Senator Lidia Thorpe's former Chief of Staff says he was scared and appalled by her outburst in a meeting with 2 Indigenous community leaders at Parliament House last year, describing her behaviour among the most unprofessional conduct he has ever witnessed. The claims by Thorpe's ex-top advisor reinforce the account of the meeting by Aboriginal elder Auntie Geraldine Atkinson, aged in her 70s, who's previously alleged the tirade of abuse levelled at her by the senator distressed her so much that she sought medical attention from the parliamentary nurse. So this is David Mayer Canales, who used to work for Thorpe. He's since resigned. He was at this meeting with the co-chairs of the First Peoples Assembly of Victoria. And an email that he wrote has been leaked in which he described what Lidia Thorpe did as appalling conduct. He offered an apology to Ms. Atkinson. Some of this email reads, "Since that meeting, I've wanted to reach out to you to apologise because the conduct that I witnessed at that meeting was by far one of the most unprofessional displays I've ever seen, not just during the length of my career, but in my life." In a letter revealed last year, Atkinson said in the meeting Thorpe criticised the prominent Bamblett family, of which Atkinson is a member, saying they'd always tried to undermine her and bring her down, and suggested Atkinson was involved in corrupt Aboriginal organisations. When I tried to intervene to respond, Senator Thorpe spoke over the top of me in a highly aggressive tone, repeatedly stating, "I'm an Australian senator, you were in my meeting." I interpreted this as her using her position to try to intimidate me. Thoughts? You go first.
Thoughts. My thoughts are that obviously Lidia is in the news a lot for things like this. And I think that I don't want to excuse her actions. Like, it sounds like it was fucked. I don't know. It sounds bad, sure. But at the same time, everything that Lidia does is so personal and so deeply held that her role really is so different to many of the other politicians in the place. And I always come back to, I remember this essay or this article that I read in uni once. It was for like a rhetoric course actually, but it was kind of like against objectivity and from the perspective of a woman who was talking about, you know, growing up dirt poor, growing up in public housing and being told that it wouldn't be appropriate for her to argue points on her experience or on, you know, public housing, that sort of thing, because she was too close to it. And how fucking stupid that is. And that's, I think that sometimes a lot of the criticism about Lidia is that she's emotional. Again, I think it's very true that the media want to paint Lidia as an angry black woman, as that kind of archetype. But because she got no filter. She fucking has no filter. And I love it, but it's not something that we're used to. And it's true that I hope that we do have mechanisms in place to respond when that causes problems, because it does. Like, interpersonal shit happens in life, and you need a way to make sure that people are safe in that space.
Well, this seems to be, you know, one part of the response is, you know, so the line across the board has been there are processes, there's internal complaint processes, individual cases, won't comment on that, processes. And some people would argue this party response has been pretty lacking. Under the Greens' Federal Party Room Guidelines for Ethical Behaviour, MPs are required to be responsible at all times for maintaining a healthy and safe working environment and behave in a professional manner at all times when engaging in interpersonal relations, including with stakeholders and staff. Atkinson said she never got a response from Adam at the time. Adam's office's response said that Mr. Bant reiterates that the party has updated internal complaints handling procedures following the Jenkins review in regards to internal complaints. And he said that he has full confidence in Senator Thorpe. That was sort of a couple of days ago. And then eventually there was an acknowledgement from Adam Bant saying that he should have contacted Ms. Atkinson, admitting that he should have acknowledged that written complaint and explained what happened, which was him talking to Lidia Thorpe about the incident. So there was a sort of slight acknowledgement of they could have done that better, but didn't necessarily apologise for the way that the issue had been handled necessarily.
Yeah.
And then did you see the talking points for all Greens MPs were leaked in the media? It was leaked to Patricia Karvelis at the ABC about how to respond if the media asks you these questions.
Yeah, but I will say I've seen those talking points. Like, I get emailed those. It's what's emailed to a very big list, as I understand it. So it's not that crazy that they were quote unquote leaked. Like it could be many, many people would be on that list. But leaked talking points always sounds spicy and fun, doesn't it?
It does. And the way I think the Daily Mail wrote it was like, they didn't acknowledge that talking points are a thing. They were like, the Greens sent everybody messages as to what to say in the media. Like every political party does that literally every fucking day. But
that's how it works.
What do you think of the highest standards? So obviously people point to the hypocrisy charge. Whenever anything like this involving bad behaviour within members of the Greens or internal tension, there is always this hypocrisy charge and, we're in the moral high ground and Greens always acting like they're so cool and yet they have these bad things inside their
cuddly, cuddly, cuddly. Isn't that what Bolt said? We said cuddly, cuddly, cuddly.
It's so good.
Cuddly, cuddly, cuddly.
So, which is like, I'm like, yes, we should hold ourselves to a higher standard. I think that's fair enough. The response, the implication from some people seems to be, this is why you shouldn't have high standards at all. See? So, like, we don't have higher standards and we're shit, but therefore we're not hypocrites. Whereas you guys have high standards that you fall short of and therefore you suck.
Yeah, I think that that's true. I think that the argument is bullshit. But at the same time, I actually think the interesting thing that this says is that people still have this idea that the Greens think that we're better than everyone else.
Yep.
And so I always, as frustrating and bullshit as this angle is, if it's coming from, if it's still working with ordinary people, I think it's a good reminder that we have a lot of work to do to undo this idea that the Greens are judging you for everything that you do. It means, people are always on the defensive because, they think that we think that they're bad. And so they hate us for that and want to talk about how we're bad as well. You know what I mean?
We think, like, if there are any people listening to this, we think you're good, okay?
Yeah, I think you're good.
People.
I probably think you're too good. Like, I'm probably a little bit too lax with some of the shit things you're doing.
We're jealous of you.
Yeah.
Okay, so Lydia's response herself, and look, Lidia is a friend of the show. She's been on the show. I've got extraordinary respect for her, and I think that her presence in Parliament is fantastic and great on balance overall. Her response to this particular meeting doesn't seem to be that great. At the time, Thorpe described the meeting as a robust discussion about Victoria's treaty program in which she raised concerns about the exclusion of some of the state's 38 clans from the process. As recently as April this year, Thorpe described the exchange as just a normal conversation I have in Parliament every day, saying I did nothing wrong, so there's no apology. One senior Greens party member, speaking on the condition of anonymity to talk frankly about the allegations, said there was growing concerns across the broader party membership about Thorpe's conduct and approach to political issues. It's a growing concern among members that our behaviour needs to reflect our values. It is difficult to raise issues and matters relating to others when poor behaviour goes unchecked and unchallenged in our own ranks.
Would you say that's a growing concern across the broader party membership?
Nope. I think that's someone with
not heard that at all.
Political agenda. Yeah, expressing their own concern and doing that classic thing that all humans beings do, which is, this is what I think, therefore I think it's what most people are thinking.
Yeah.
And I think you and I have slightly different takes on this in regards to Lidia Thorpe's strategy and some of these things that seem to come up around her actions, okay? Now, I absolutely agree. I think there is a racist element and a racial element to the coverage of her. I think that painting of her as an angry black woman is totally fair enough. But it's also true that some things that Lidia Thorpe has mainly said, either on social media or in the Parliament itself, become stories that distract from the bigger mission. And it means that there's a slightly embarrassing detours that may affect the way that how seriously people take the party and the great stuff that Lidia Thorpe and the rest of the party are fighting for. And that's my concern.
That's true.
The comment about Holly Hughes in Parliament was awful. She apologised for that. Fair enough.
Yeah.
She made comments in the Parliament, implying the Northern Territory Attorney General was a white male when in fact it was an Aboriginal woman. That tweet about Parliament House being on fire and saying the colonial system's burning down, I didn't think was that great. And, we have the incident like this, which is just like, no one should be, even in robust discussions, no one afterwards should be, seriously upset to the point where they need medical attention. And anyone making a complaint about that should be treated with respect and be listened to. I think that's fair enough. So I think that's a pretty shitty failure from the party. And it doesn't seem like Lydia's interested in reassessing her behaviour there or apologising in any way. And again, to be all of it, it's just like, well, I'm talking about this when I would rather be talking about the First Nations justice that I know Lydia fucking loves and cares about and fights for.
I think the point about it being a distraction from the real work is a good one. But at the same time, I do think it's like that's really only worth discussing when it's a conscious decision as to what we're focusing on in my mind, if we're talking about, political strategy and how the Greens work. And these are never deliberate decisions. They're fuck-ups.
Yep.
But more to the point, they are all the media will focus on, and the media will choose to ignore everything that Lidia does most of the time except these things.
Right.
And that's, that's just the name of the game. That's what we're dealing with. That's the nature of the beast. And so I think that apologizing, like acknowledging when you fucked up is always a good thing. Big subscriber to that. And I think most of the time Lidia does. I think, the fact that she hasn't apologized about this is interesting given she's apologized about other things in the past. And it just makes you just, we weren't in that room. We just don't know. This is all like a lot of it is all hearsay and it's very subjective. So this particular incident, who knows?
But again, coming back to like, it's not our business, right? Like that is the interpersonal interaction between two adults. Now, the implication that this invalidates the whole Greens political project or everything that Lidia says, I mean, that's the bullshit that
that's
gets
absolute
frustrating.
bullshit.
It's like, no, they're people who can deal with their own shit, okay? And it sounds like the people were shitty to each other and there should have been a bit better process. But the idea that it is obviously wheeled out to say, like, therefore the Greens are stupid, don't listen to anything they say, nothing they're on about makes any sense, they're not a legitimate voice, as Andrew Bolt made very clear on Sky News, that these people are not fit to be in the parliament, get rid of them. That is a political strategy. That's a political attack from our political enemies.
Yeah.
And, of course, we should remember that Andrew Bolt defended Fraser Anning back in 2018. So he said that Lidia Thorpe is the nastiest politician in Canberra. She shouldn't be there. Fraser Anning, in his statement in the wake of the Christchurch, was making some really good points about immigration.
Fraser Anning is the real cuddler. Smoke weed every day. 2 calls, 2 actions, 2 cute little hosts, Emerald and Tom. That's our podcast. Serious danger.
We're back.
We're back.
We're back. A dinosaur story.
The first call to action this week is, particularly if you're in Queensland, but you can do it from outside of Queensland because this is a pretty significant thing. Lock the Gate primarily and a bunch of other like pastoralists, traditional owners. There's this alliance that are trying to get the Queensland Labor government to ban unconventional gas exploration, including fracking in Channel Country. So this is in the Lake Eyre Basin in Western Queensland. Floodplains and rivers that are particularly sensitive to this kind of unconventional gas exploration could just completely fuck the water table, fuck things for farmers and for traditional owners and people who rely on this land. And also at the same time, some of the gas projects that are proposed here would have massive emissions, massive impacts on climate change. So the government has said I think it's literally 3 or even 4 elections in a row that they'll do this, and they just haven't done it yet. But we hear that they are considering it and going to make a decision very soon. There's a form email that you can use to email them and urge them to protect Channel Country. We will put the link in the show notes. And there's another call to action, Tom?
Oh, yes. The Royal Commission into Robodebt started this week. Victims, the family members of victims. I listened to a 7am podcast this week of a mother whose son took his own life within hours after getting his debt notice. It is a fucking disgrace. And the Royal Commission exposing that, giving victims a voice and holding people to account, including, pulling fuckers like Alan Tudge and Scott Morrison before the Royal Commission to hold them to account and definitely send them to prison is a very good thing.
Impeach.
They'll be censured. We'll censure their fucking asses off. If you or someone you know is affected by the Robodebt scandal, please give submissions. I think they're surprised there aren't more submissions at the moment. They say they understand why people might not want to be re-traumatized by it all, but it can actually really make a huge difference. Please consider it. robodebt.royalcommission.gov.au. That link will be in the show notes. If you want to make a submission and share your experience or the experience of someone you know, that would be great to do, for sure.
If you want to share your experience of this podcast, you can leave us a review. You can do it on Apple Podcasts or wherever you're listening now,
or talk to the Royal
please.
Commission into serious danger, which is...
Yes, that's right. Make a submission in the form of tapping 5 stars and then writing, "You guys are sexy and cute" on your podcasting app. And please also make a submission by following us on social media and then commenting on all our posts. Damn, did you guys get smarter and hotter? You can find us on @SeriousDangerAU on Twitter, Instagram, TikTok, and YouTube. And you can find all of our links on seriousdangerpod.com. Email us, hello@seriousdangerpod.com. We love your stories and your suggestions, and we love you.
See you next week, everyone. Bye.
We'll never leave you again.
Serious Danger Australia.